Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome. I am Phi the Neutrophil, and I've come to tell you of a grand old tale, the tale of the mitochondria, which I'm very excited to do. Hello, 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 Eric. Hello, Pole Volter. Welcome, welcome. Before I get into talking about our collective favorite organelle, how are y'all doing today? I'm doing pretty well. Let's go ahead and play some music. I wanted to come up with a stream idea that would not be terribly difficult for me to do. And so I thought, you know, I've wanted to kind of go through canonical teaching of biology and like put my own kind of spin on it. So unlike the RNA stream where I was attempting to tell you something new about about RNA, today I'm going to revisit what you already know about the mitochondria, but I'm going to put a little bit of my own funk on it, right? Because I think that school would be a lot better if all of your teachers ended every lesson with why the thing that they taught for that day is cool, instead of just having you attempt to figure it out on your own, right? And so I think biology, it's tough because there's so much content in biology. There's so much that you actually have to memorize that I think teachers don't really have the energy or time to tell you exactly why everything in the book is cool, and everything is cool in the book. Whether or not your taste agrees with that is a different question. Hey, Silly Diva. Yes, you've made a live stream, and it's a great one too. We're talking about the mitochondria. But I want to talk about the mitochondria through the lens of looking at the stuff that you may have thought was boring about the mitochondria and trying to make that sound fun and interesting. But before I get into that in particular, I just want to update you all that I reached the threshold for monetization, which is very fun. I think I broke that last stream. And me and Toxo are cooking up a couple of membership ideas. And I'm very excited to show you what we've been planning, but that won't be quite ready just yet. I haven't forgotten about my 1K milestone goal. I promised to eat a SCOBY, which is the symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria that floats on top of kombucha. But to give you all an update on how that culture is going, not that well. I think it's actually like way too cold to do ferments in my room right now, which is a shame. This culture has been sitting for 2 weeks and is still kind of dead. Well, not dead. I don't know that I would call it dead, but growth is a lot slower than I had expected, and sometimes it's just how biology works, right? No guarantees here or there. That's enough about microbes. Let's talk about some eukaryotes and their endosymbiotic buddies. Let's talk about the freaking mitochondria already, all right? All right, so I'm gonna shrink myself. Alrighty. And let's bring up that PowerPoint. Not a sponsor. Okay, so today we're talking about my favorite things about the mitochondria, right? And I'm sure you have your own list of things that you like about the mitochondria, and I'll probably get to them. Whoops, let's resize that, great. And so again, I want to tackle this in a way that reframes how we typically learn about the mitochondria, and I'm going to try to make that story a little more interesting. And so there's not likely new information here, but this is my perspective, all right? So what do we know about the mitochondria? We know, from 101, that the mitochondria is an organelle that produces chemical energy in the form of ATP. So ATP is this sort of universal molecular currency that cells use to get work done. It's not the only source of chemical energy that your cells have, but it is like the major one. You see it pop up all the time. And number two, and this is the fun fact that I think a lot of people retain, is that the mitochondria is hypothesized to be an ancient bacteria that our cellular ancestors absorbed, which is very, very fun. And I'll get a little bit into that a little later in this stream. I'm sure that there are other cool things about the mitochondria, but I want to tackle these two first, and especially this first one, because I don't know how many of you watching, if you want to tell me what your experiences were like in biology class when you had to learn glycolysis / the citric acid cycle, unless you've never learned of these things before. So, yeah, I just want to know from chat, like, how much do you tolerate or despise cellular respiration? I'll actually kind of make it a poll because I want to get a feel for, like, you know, what my audience's attitude is towards some of this biology. So let's do cellular respiration. Yay or nay? Let's start a poll. Yeah, so when I was learning glycolysis for the first time, I remember I was in utter pain. Hello, have a nice day. When I first encountered these pathways, it was in AP biology, and at that time, I still wanted to be a medical doctor. And unfortunately, for those of you who do want to make medicine out of your career, one of the things that you have to learn is glycolysis, the citric acid cycle, oxidative phosphorylation, the whole kit and caboodle, right? And I remember being absolutely miserable because my memory, my capacity to store new information is pretty low. I said this in my last stream, but my working memory, so the number of like different objects I can hold in my brain at any given time, is like 5-ish. I mean, I didn't have it formally tested, but there are tests that you can do online that'll give you an idea of how many digits you can fit in your head. So if you tell me your phone number, I'm not going to be able to memorize it upon hearing it just one time. Or I'm barely gonna get half of your phone number, in fact. And so memorization for me has always been really, really tough. And despite me loving biology so much, one of the hurdles to me actually like doing well in it is the fact that it is so memory intensive. And so I really struggled my first time like trudging through all of this. And don't worry, we're not going to actually talk about memorizing anything. I'm actually barely even going to tell you how those pathways work. But what I will tell you is why I think they're cool. It looks like from the poll that I've taken that most of you are already on board with the idea of cellular respiration, which is surprising to me because, you know, at least it was the opinion of my contemporaries at the time that trying to memorize all of this nonsense was, well, nonsense. But I'm glad that my audience is into this. So I'm sure that some of this might not be new to you, but I'm happy to geek out alongside you as well. Okay, so the mitochondria makes chemical energy ATP, and I want to go over what the heck ATP even is. Because we kind of take this molecule for granted in biology education. We just sort of call it, oh, you know, it's chemical energy. It's a chemical that when you use it, you can use it to do some kind of work, which is not a bad operational definition. But to understand why the mitochondria is so cool, I think we have to look a little more carefully at this molecule. All right, so let's take a look. Right, so this is a molecule of ATP. So we have an adenosine group here. So these molecules are actually related to the stuff that makes up your DNA. In fact, it's a precursor to those molecules. But for our purposes, what's interesting here are these 3 phosphates. So it's adenosine triphosphate, these phosphates here that are attached to this adenosine. And from basic chemistry, I'm not a chemist, so a lot of this is going to be my best attempt at explaining this accurately, and if any of you are chemists, feel free to correct me. But if we look at this tail end of this molecule, this ATP, we'll see 3 phosphates, and they all have a lot of oxygens. Each of these phosphates is connected to 4 of them, and so there are a lot of electrons in this general area. And you'll notice that these phosphates also carry a charge, right? There's a lot of negative charge locally in this space, which makes this molecule a particularly good candidate for being chemical fuel. So why is that? To understand why ATP makes for such a great chemical fuel, we have to kind of look at free energy diagrams, which I haven't looked at one of these since grad school. It's been a while. But what we should know is that in order for us to do chemical work, we need to start off with substrates. So that's our starting material. Our substrates have to have a higher energy in their bonds than our products. And so the difference in the starting energy of our stuff and the ending energy of our stuff is the difference in free energy, which is the energy that will allow us to do work, right? And so this is sort of a bit of an abstract way to understand energy, but if we look at something that we are more familiar with, like dynamite, we can maybe start to see what exactly it is we're talking about when we're talking about chemical energy, right? So a major component of dynamite is nitroglycerin. Here we have the chemical formula C3H5N3O9. And after a combustion reaction, you know, when you ignite nitroglycerin or shock nitroglycerin, you give it this initial push up this energy slope. And this complex is so unstable that it will spontaneously degrade. And so when you spark this, you'll change from this nitroglycerin down to its products, which are carbon dioxide, water, and nitrogen. Hello, Risky Risk. Late, what is meant by substrate in this case? Great question. So substrate basically refers to our starting materials that we will convert into our ending materials. In the case of dynamite, the substrate is nitroglycerin, and the products are carbon dioxide, water, and nitrogen. For those of you who don't know, combustion, you know, the thing that we think of when we think of fiery, highly energetic reactions that produce a lot of heat, the definition of a combustion reaction is a reaction that starts with these organic compounds, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and ends with carbon dioxide and water. So all you need to do to qualify to be a combustion reaction is to start with organic material and end with carbon dioxide and water. This is going to be important for why the mitochondria is cool later. So we're thinking of dynamite, and the starting stuff has higher energy than the lower stuff. The difference in that energy is the heat that we get when we talk about dynamite, right? The same principles apply to ATP, right? And the reason why I say that is that nitroglycerin, you know, because it's dynamite, is highly unstable. It wants to be at a lower energy to be more stable and less reactive. ATP is kind of the same way, because if we look here, there are these 3 phosphate groups that are stacked on top of one another. They all contain their own density of negative charge, and these would really prefer not to be attached at the hip to this adenosine. They would really prefer to be dissolved in water and away from one another. So this is like our nitroglycerin. But instead of heat, we are going to use that energy to move molecules in a way that will be useful for the cell. So in our analogy, our ATP is our nitroglycerin. It's our starting substrate. We're going to break it down, and that'll be good for our chemical reactions. Risky Risk, what makes a molecule more or less stable? This is a great question for chemists to answer. I am less good at answering this question. From my very rudimentary chemistry memory, for certain molecules, there will be a propensity for certain regions of a molecule to want to form bonds. And if they want to form bonds, then that makes them or rather like, so I'll try to explain it this way. So all substrates, all things that have the potential to react have a certain energy, and just the law of entropy, just like the law of, you know, nature, all of these molecules actually want to exist at their lowest energy possible. And so highly reactive, unstable compounds are really want to be something else, but they're just not reactive enough to like be okay without disturbance. And that has to do with sort of their inherent chemistry, a lot to do with where electrons are located. In the case of ATP, it's a little easier to explain because there's so many electrons here, and you know that like negative charge repels negative charge. These phosphates do not want to be near one another. They would much rather be enclosed in a shell of water, so that the positive side of water can sort of nudge that negative side of the phosphates, or bond to that phosphates. Pack, can you make a video about cellular respiration, because it's so hard and I need it for my biochem exam? This is it. I mean, I can't. So the goal of my channel isn't necessarily to get you to pass your tests. It's for you to fall in love with biology, right? So if you want, you can go to Khan Academy or SciShow, and they are a lot better at explaining topics for the purposes of testing. Here, I'll give you an appreciation or my appreciation for these processes. So if you're starting to hate biology, I think my videos are better for that. Risky Risk is a high energy molecule necessarily unstable. That is a great question, and I don't have a great answer to that. Chemistry is a little far from my personal comfort zone. But awesome question nonetheless. Great questions. Because there's a difference between how much energy you end up releasing and how much activation energy you need to spark that reaction. My PowerPoint is resized in a strange way. Let's get that back. Yeah. So I think, to your point, my best answer would be, we'll go back to the energy chart here, right? So this is just something that I pulled from Wikimedia. So it's not representative of the actual sizes of these energy changes, but something like nitroglycerin, which is very reactive. This activation energy, this spark that you need to actually get this reaction to happen, is not very high at all. You still need a little bit of energy to start these reactions, right? So unstable means that you just need a tiny bit of input to get this reaction to occur. And then this difference below this curve, this difference between substrate and product, that determines how much energy is given off. So highly explosive stuff, this is going to be really big. And if it really wants to react, this is going to be really small. And I hope that I've gotten that correct. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the kind words, Pack. Okay, so, yeah, ATP. So ATP really wants to not be ATP in terms of energetics. And so this is why this makes for a great fuel for us. But here's an interesting question, and it's not something that I think biology teachers typically ask, is how do you make a high energy molecule? Again, these phosphates with their negative charge, they don't want to be next to each other. They would prefer not to be. So making a high energy molecule requires energy. And here we have what I call the energy paradox, right? This Ouroboros of causality. I've already told you that one of the major fuel sources for the cell is ATP, but you need energy to make ATP. So do you burn ATP to make ATP? That seems incorrect, right? That seems totally whack. Risky Risk, lots of input energy like sunlight. Oh, you are spoiling something that I am going to be talking about later. You're getting a little ahead of me. Sunlight definitely plays a role here, but not quite at this stage in terms of the paradox that I'm talking about, right? So we have this paradox. We have the fact that, you know, you need energy to make ATP, but ATP is energy. It's kind of like applying for a job nowadays, right? You need experience to get job experience. You need job experience to get hired for a job. Getting hired for a job gives you job experience. So where do you start, right? This is the fundamental problem that cellular respiration solves. And I think that goes underappreciated in the classroom because it's mind-boggling what we evolved to do. All right. Hello, Justin. High energy substrates can be broken down to provide energy. Yep. And so we've got our ATP, our high energy substrate. There are other high energy substrates as well in the cell. That is definitely true. But the mitochondria, the topic for today, does it in a way that is extremely clever, and we're going to get into that. And so I posted this meme on my Twitter and in my community post. Ooh, it's getting cut off a little bit. So cellular life has been able to solve this issue in a number of different ways. And so the ways that they do it are very varied, especially microbes. Prokaryotes have a ton of different ways to solve this issue, but eukaryotes kind of converged on this aerobic respiration pathway. Sorry. Eukaryotes, by acquiring the mitochondria, have evolved the most efficient way to turn chemical energy to turn starting material into chemical energy. And the way that they are going to do that is going to be very fun to look into, as we're about to get to. And the reason why this is so exciting is because if you're not a eukaryote, if you're a prokaryote, this is not the only pathway that prokaryotes have, but the one that we typically learn is fermentation. So fermentive microbes that don't use oxygen to generate energy, have a very, very low efficiency if they use the fermentation pathway. In fact, if you were to compare us to our prokaryotic cousins, the net gain from fermentation is just 2 ATP, and all of that ATP gain is from glycolysis, the process by which cells break down sugar. If you were to calculate the maximum yield of ATP that you could get from breaking down a molecule of sugar, then glycolysis/fermentation only gets you 5% of that efficiency. 5%. These microbes have been around for, millions of years, and the best that the prokaryotic realm can, well, not the best, but one major way that the prokaryotic realm has been able to solve this issue only clocks in at 5% efficiency. But us Chad-like eukaryotes with our mitochondria can get up to 77% efficiency. Dendrital, yes. Oxidative phosphorylation, heck yeah, man. 30 to 32 on average per molecule, exactly. That's an insane increase in efficiency. That makes fermentation look like child's play. And the other thing about mitochondria is that this is the same reaction as dynamite exploding. It's literally a combustion reaction. We start off with an organic molecule, we start off with sugar, and our end products are carbon dioxide and water. So you can imagine all of these little mitochondria that exist in your cells are little combustion chambers. But instead of heat pushing a piston that drives a steam engine, your mitochondria turns that energy into a molecular currency stores that energy in that ATP. And then that ATP can be used to do other things. Is bacteria to mitochondria a hypothesis or a valid theory? So when we talk about the model, I'll call it a model, right? So if I call it a model, it's a way that scientists can conceive of the truth. And so maybe one day we'll find out that this didn't happen, but chances are pretty good that it did, right? There are lots of different little pieces of evidence that we can look at that show that the mitochondria probably had a bacterial origin, and there's been nothing so far that I know of that provides an alternative hypothesis that explains the story better. So that doesn't mean that, oh, you know, there's a big debate as to whether or not the mitochondria was like an ancient bacteria. But scientists are always careful to hedge, and that's very important. So I can't say that, oh, we all agree, but I can say that I believe that this is the best explanation that we have so far, if that makes sense. So it's important that we get used to talking about science in that way. Science is always our best current guess, or sorry, not guess, our best current conceptualization of how things happened. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to just touch upon, and I'm covering it just a little bit, but you know, I think it's easy to forget that life on planet Earth evolved kind of twice. Like I don't know how many mass extinctions were before the formation of oxygen in the atmosphere, but oxygen is pretty reactive. Oxygen is pretty deadly and is responsible for one of the biggest mass extinctions on the planet Earth. And I don't know if it's to deal with that oxygen, but as a side effect of the mitochondria's ability to make ATP, you convert harmful O2 to water, which is kind of cool. Yeah, deadly oxygen. I'm actually going to talk a lot more about how oxygen can be used in offensively in my gonorrhea story, which I'm so close to finish editing. I'm very close to my gonorrhea video being done, and I hope you all give it a watch when that's ready. Hello, more juice. Welcome to the stream. Okay. So, mitochondria, absolute chads. Dan Doodle, is your channel going to focus on biochem, or will it be more into medicine? So, I will cover whatever biology I personally find interesting. So if you look at my channel, you'll see that I've done a little bit of microbio, I've done a little pathogen stuff. I'm not actually a doctor, so when I choose to tackle a pathogen, it's not through the lens of health or sickness or, you know, any of that. It's analyzing pathogens through my like molecular biology scope. And so, you know, there are ideas in the pipeline that are about, you know, cell and development, which is really interesting to me, like how embryos form, which I think is really important. I have ideas about other pathogens, you know, most famously, everybody wants me to do a prion video. I'll do one eventually. So stay tuned for that. But, you know, there are more interesting nooks of biology that I want to get into. I want to convince all of you that all of biology is cool, so. More juice. That's why humans are freaking hardcore. Oxygen would normally kill us, but we adapted and now it fuels us. Exactly. Like, how is that not a great story? I love the oxygen story. You're surreal. I'm doing the immunology metabolism modules as a part of medicine, and these are so fun. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if you mean like these videos or your actual lessons that you've been taking, but I don't know. I thank you on behalf of biology. I don't know that I can speak for all of biology, but I'm glad that you are having fun. Okay. So, yeah, the mitochondria is a literal combustion engine, right? So I mentioned earlier when talking about dynamite that if we start off with organic material and we end with CO2, H2O, then by definition, we are doing a combustion reaction. And so that's, you know, true. So you can imagine like little sparks of fire, you know, it's not technically accurate, but you can think of it that way. That's what's happening inside the mitochondria, which is very, very, very neat. And in that process, in this reaction, we are taking our constituent substrates, ADP and inorganic phosphate, and we are going to smush them. We're going to force them to become ATP using this pathway. So I said earlier that ADP and inorganic phosphate, with all these negative charges, they don't actually want to stick to one another. The mitochondria is going to figure out a way to get them to stick to one another, and that's sick. Hello, Riley. The mitochondrial is the powerhouse of the cell. Thank you. I'm surprised nobody has said it before you. So, during respiration or during metabolism, one of the inputs into the citric acid cycle is going to be pyruvate, which we get from glycolysis. So we eat food, we take that food, we break it down. Some of those breakdown products are sugars. Those sugars are going to be fed into the mitochondria as pyruvate. So we've already done a little bit of breaking down of the sugar, enough to get 2 net ATP, and then the rest of that is going to go into the mitochondria to be used to make our cellular fuel. The citric acid cycle is the pathway that the glucose gets fed into as pyruvate, as we can see up here. What I'm going to say about this is that it's important. As a student, I always looked at the citric acid cycle and like my eyes would just glaze over. There's just so much happening here. And I feel like when you learn it to memorize it, which isn't fun at all. So I'm not going to belabor the point. The citric acid cycle is really important. I'm saying that so that the citric acid cycle stands don't come at me. I'm not saying that it's not important. But for our purposes, we want to pay attention to the blue text here. So we're getting this molecule called NADH. We are taking NAD+, and we are giving it an electron and a proton and forming NADH. And we're going to use that in the oxidative phosphorylation pathway, which we are just about to get into. So all of this, if you're a student, I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to memorize that. But for the purposes of telling our story, we're gonna pay attention to these NADH molecules. I'm gonna read chat for a bit. Science has an obsession with cycles in general, huh? Yeah, it's a lot in biology, especially biochemistry. You get a lot of these pathways, and pathways, they're neat. They're not personally for me. My memory can't really handle them, but I like to challenge myself to find out what I can make interesting about these cycles. Riley's, also, since you get all of your mitochondrial DNA from your mom is the powerhouse of the mitochondria. True. And I'm actually going to talk about a little bit about maternal inheritance of mitochondria in just a little bit. But yes, if you didn't know, you actually inherit your mitochondria from your mom, which is interesting because what happens to dad's mitochondria? Don't spoil it. I will get to that later. Dan Doodle, great acronym is Officer Can I Keep Selling for Money? You gotta do what you gotta do to memorize these things. I don't remember what mnemonic I used, but if you're a biology student and you're not writing flashcards full of mnemonics, you're doing biology wrong. Given that when you get to grad school, biology is a lot more fun because they don't put as much emphasis on memorizing everything. But up until you get to that point, you just gotta know stuff, and that's a great acronym, I think, to go with. So the citric acid cycle is important. It's not only used for oxidative phosphorylation in the mitochondria. You also use the citric acid cycle to do other things in the metabolic pathways. So just know that the citric acid cycle is POG, but we're not going to get into why beyond the fact that it makes us a lot of this tasty NADH. So if the citric acid cycle isn't the POG part of the story, then what is? So the part that I want to geek out over is the electron transport chain that harnesses the power of protons and electrons to smush ATP together. And I want to get an idea for how many of you recognize what is on the side of my screen right now. So I'll start another poll because this actually gives me a gauge to see how old my audience is. And so I'll put a poll up there. So, anybody recognize this thing on screen? So curious. I'm revealing that I am quite a boomer. For a cell type that only lasts for about 8 days, I am quite old to be acquainted with one of these guys. Our votes are coming in. Votes are coming in, and it sounds like y'all are similarly boomer to me. So for those of you who don't know, this thing on the right here, this thing up here, this guy, that's called a Beyblade. And what a Beyblade is a toy. It's a top that you pull a ripcord through to give it the initial rotational energy. Hi, Sai. Welcome to the stream. We're talking about generating energy and Beyblades. I do, and it's making my millennial heart happy. Yes, yes. So, this Beyblade, right? This thing. What you would do is you would take the Beyblade and you would like put these two parts together, and using like this cord here, you would pull this cord and that cord would make the Beyblade spin, and it would like spin very rapidly, and kids would, you know, battle the tops together. You would, you know, rip them into a box. Yeah, I think the phrase was "let it rip" or something like that. And they would bounce off of each other and destroy each other, which was sick. I never owned one, but I was highly jealous of anybody who did. Yeah. More juice. Maybe more of a chemistry question, but I wonder if it's possible to synthesize pure ATP NADH in orally consumable form, or is it too unstable of a molecule to create powders of? So, I don't have a great answer to that. I have worked with ATP in the lab, and ATP is pretty unstable. You generally have to keep it very, very, very cold, like -20 for shipping, at least to my knowledge. It's a reagent that can degrade quite quickly. I don't really know about NADH though. So what do Beyblades and the electron transport chain have in common? Well, let's get into defining what will be our Beyblade and what will be our ripcord, right? So the ripcord in our situation is going to be what's called a hydrogen electrochemical gradient. So we are going to push hydrogen way out into the outer membrane, and we are going to stack the amount of hydrogen on the outside. And when that hydrogen flows back through this enzyme called ATP synthase, that's going to generate the ripcord that we need to get this ATP to spin like a Beyblade, and that's going to be sick. And oh my god, I believe that is my first super chat. EngineCrafter77, thank you so much. I wasn't so yes, I've turned super chats on, but I haven't had like a formal membership stream yet. But I just wanted to turn things on. You know, not really expecting anybody to find their way to that button, but thank you so much for the donation. Thank you, thank you. Hey man, although I understand very little biology, your content is top notch. See you on the top when the algorithm picks up on you. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Risky Risk, he had so many Beyblades. True. We have tons of Beyblades in our body. More juice. Imagine chugging an ATP milkshake though. Although I'm not sure the digestive system is the appropriate pathway to consume that. Maybe intravenous. That would be pretty interesting. Yes, I am monetized. I am monetized. The rabies video carried my channel pretty hard. Thank you so much, Engine Crafter. That's really, really awesome. What a delight. Okay, so let's get back into the story, right? Thank you, more juice. Let's get back into the story. Let's zoom in to the mitochondrial matrix. here we have the citric acid cycle that happens inside of the mitochondria, and here are those NADHs that I was talking about. So during the citric acid cycle, we're generating these NADHs, and this NADH is going to donate this hydrogen. And in order to do so, it has to also get rid of an electron, right? So it passes this hydrogen through these protein complexes, protein complex 1, cytochrome Q, protein complex 3 and 4. I don't know why they're named that way, they just are. So it's pushing these hydrogens, these protons, through these protein complexes. But where is that electron going to go? Because you can't just push a hydrogen proton through the pump and not have to deal with that electron. That electron has to go somewhere. And it turns out that in the inner mitochondrial membrane, through cytochrome Q and through these protein complexes, this electron gets shuttled all the way over to oxygen. And when that electron attacks that oxygen, it's going to give it enough energy to capture some hydrogens in the inner membrane and form water. So it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. We're generating this proton pump. We're pushing all of these protons out into the outer membrane. And in doing so, we're also taking care of this errant electron by giving it to oxygen to form water. So this builds up a ton of protons in between the outer and inner membrane. Yeah, the rabies video was sick. Also, bacteria addiction was fire too. Thank you! I'm really, really proud of that bacterial addiction video. But it's kind of interesting. I don't know if you want to hear about like YouTube meta, but YouTube actually will officially recommend that you mix up the type of content that you do. And like I knew that the rabies video had the highest potential to go viral because like people just are really curious about rabies. But I was hoping that I could convince people to click on that bacterial addiction video too, which is seeing a lot more growth than I was expecting. So I'm glad that that's piqued some people's curiosity. Risky risk. How do we even know these things, lol? Every factoid that I lay down is a PhD's entire life. It might seem crazy, but like, I think there's so much meaning behind that, right? Like, we only know this much about everything because we've thrown tons of scientists' bodies at the problems. Rabies scary, YouTube happy. I know, and I'm like distraught over the fact, like, I don't want to be like clickbaity, and I've said this on stream before that like, I don't want people to leave my stream with neuroses. Like, I don't want people to come out of my stream feeling afraid, because it would be so easy. I could do this so easily by just putting a picture of a rabid dog in the thumbnail, and I'm sure that would go viral because it's scary, but I don't want biology to be associated with fear. I don't want people to get panicky or paranoid, so I'm going to do biology my own way, and I'm just going to hope that the algorithm is going to accept that. Okay, so we've pumped a ton of protons in between the outer membrane and the inner membrane, and we did so because we generated this reagent, this substrate called NADH during the citric acid cycle. So all of these hydrogens are now in between the outer and inner membrane, and they're dying to come back. And they come back by ripping through ATP synthase. And when you rip through ATP synthase, it'll generate this ripcord just like a Beyblade and rotate. And in those rotating compounds, you are squeezing together ADP and inorganic phosphate to form ATP. And so here is a video of that process happening. So this is a computer animation. You can find it on Wikimedia. All of the assets that I used are Creative Commons licensed stuff on Wikimedia. And we're just going to play this. So imagine that the hydrogens are flowing down this enzyme. And as these hydrogens are flowing down, we get this rotation of the enzyme. And you can see down here, these components on the bottom of the enzyme, when they undulate, I'll play them again. As they undulate here, they are changing conformation. They're changing shape. They're changing shape in a way that squeezes that ADP and that phosphate together to form ATP. Don't worry, let's leave making biology scary to the educational system. I really hope not, though. More juice, it's too late. I'm already freaked out by constant tiny explosions happening in the mitochondria in my cells. Don't be, they are empowering you. Yeah, it's cool, right? I don't know, this is not a video that was shown to me, like, when I was learning about this. Like, I had to look this up. I saw this through, like, real old school slides that were showing just shapes changing. But when you watch it all together, you can't help but feel that, like, evolution has done something completely amazing. You thought that the Beyblade was just a convenient analogy, but it's literally spinning? Yeah, I know! It's literally a ripcord of protons that goes through the enzyme that causes it to spin. And that spinning forces the enzyme to make ATP, and that's dope as hell, right? That's so cool. It's quite dizzying to think how these things evolved via natural selection. Something that you have to keep in mind is that humans are very bad at comprehending the magnitude of big numbers, right? So evolution has had millions and millions and millions of years to tinker around with this system, and this is what we got, and it's cool as hell. So this is pretty much what you need to appreciate cellular respiration in a school context, right? Like, if you hate memorizing stuff, I hope this has given the stuff that you have to memorize a lot more life and appreciation. Or in retrospect, if you've already learned this stuff, hopefully this will make it less of a bore. But now I'm going to get to the stuff that I think is a little more clickbaity, for lack of a better term, right? We have this understanding that mitochondria are probably ancient bacteria that our cells formed an endosymbiotic relationship with. So our ancestors ate the mitochondrial's ancestors, and for whatever reason, that ancestor didn't kill the mitochondrial ancestor. And over time, these two cells evolved a mutualistic beneficiary relationship, right? That endosymbiotic relationship, that ancient bacteria then evolved to be more efficient at making energy, and our cells evolved to protect that mitochondria, to make it a part of our life. Millions of organisms with trillions of cells over millions of years, exactly. It's mind-boggling, but very cool. And so, a question that I think maybe not a lot of people have thought about is, what is the mitochondria's closest living ancestor? And so this is a field of active research, and I think this is maybe outdated by now. I mean, I pulled this from Wikipedia to be fully transparent. But rickettsia, so this is a pathogen that I believe infect deer, although I could be wrong about that, but there is a living ancestor to what we think became the mitochondria, which is just very, very cool, right? I think that's a neat thing to keep in mind. We are getting closer to understanding the transition steps between rickettsia as an ancestor and whatever had become of the, the proto-mitochondria. And maybe one day I'll do a stream on that, maybe. Although that gets further away from things that I am comfortable with. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and this is something that Riley was actually hinting at, is that your mitochondria, the mitochondria that you currently have, you get from your mother. And so I made another one of these memes because, I don't know, there's just something about biology that lends itself to virgin versus Chad memes. How do we know that it was bacteria and not like an archaea or something? That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. If I had to hypothesize, it's because that the DNA that you can isolate from a mitochondria are probably more similar to DNA found in bacteria than in archaea. That's my guess. Yeah, if you didn't know, your mitochondria also have their own DNA, which is why we know we can trace your mitochondrial lineage through your mother. So if we were to sequence the DNA in your mitochondria, it would be very, 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 very similar to the DNA that your mom got, which is cool. And so why this is interesting to me is that I knew for a very long time that we inherited our mitochondria from our mom, but I never bothered to question what happened to dad's mitochondria? Like, why don't we get mitochondria from dad? It turns out that there are two models by which paternal mitochondrial inheritance is prevented. And one of those mechanisms is that the egg destroys the male mitochondria. How hardcore is that? That there are systems in the egg that can target the male mitochondria for destruction. Is sick. I don't know why. I don't know the evolutionary reasoning behind the egg evolving a way to destroy paternal mitochondria. To be honest, it doesn't quite make sense to me. More juice. Yeah, computational biology has neat algorithms to predict which DNA sequences might be more related than others. Yes. It's also the reason why I dropped computational biology, because getting all of those sequences to align broke my brain. I quit comp bio very, very early in my career because I couldn't program my own alignment. I'm that bad at programming. There's another model by which paternal mitochondrial inheritance is prevented, and that's through the fact that a lot of the mitochondria in the sperm are concentrated in the tail, and during the grueling process by which the sperm fertilizes the egg, those tails are often lost. So through these mechanisms, mitochondrial DNA is primarily inherited through the mother. And this is true for broad swaths of the domain of life, except, and I learned this today on Wikipedia, except like one breed of chicken. There's like one weird chicken out there that inherits their mitochondria from their fathers, and I have no idea what that's about. Maybe that's another stream for a different day. Enigma Crafter, hi-fi, your chat died probably. Oh no. It looks okay to me right now, so I'm going to try refreshing. Hopefully that'll solve that. But it looks okay on my end, I think. Okay. So, yeah. I think that's pretty sick. I have no idea. I think it'd be very cool to eventually learn a little more about mitochondrial inheritance, and maybe next year, because the whole point of me doing this organelle spotlight is I kind of want to try to go in order of my Campbell's AP Bio Edition biology textbook and like touch on biology topics through the entire AP Biology curriculum and like reimagine it for you in an interesting way. So maybe next year when I cycle through the AP Bio textbook again, I'll elaborate on some of these interesting leads that I have touched upon. Are there any cells in the body that have no mitochondria from Dima? I don't know. Not off the top of my head. I don't know for sure. My guess is that the answer is no, because ATP is so ubiquitously required, but I actually cannot say that for a fact. I would be surprised if there are any cells that didn't have mitochondria or ATP, for that matter. Is it like a way to prevent unnecessary mutations? More juice, that's a good hypothesis, but I'm not entirely sure how that would mechanistically prevent mutation. So my hypothesis, and this is completely just a guess, so don't put any weight, don't say, oh, this is how it works, because I truly don't. My guess is that this might have to do with mom's immune system. If there are like male, no, or I should say paternal, if there are paternal mitochondria in the egg, there's a chance, maybe, that the paternal proteins get displayed on the egg and look like a foreign infection. And that might not be so cool for the immune system. That's my guess. I don't know if that's true, but that's my guess. Red blood cells? So red blood cells don't have nuclei. They eject their nuclei because they don't need it anymore. They rely on glycolysis. Do they solely rely on glycolysis? They don't have any mitochondria? That's surprising to me if that's true. I wish they'd make a modern version of Parasite Eve. I actually don't know what that is. So do white muscle fibers. White muscle fibers don't have mitochondria? I'm actually not entirely sure. I'm unaware of that level of physiology, I'll put it that way. The other thing that the eggs destroying the male mitochondria allows me to talk a little bit about are the proteasome. So I love talking about this thing, and I've done it on a couple of different streams now, but the proteasome is this thing right here. It's this like weird salt pepper shaker that you see, and it's basically like a garbage disposal, like in your sink. And the egg, the way that it destroys these mitochondrial, the paternal mitochondria, are by tagging them with something called ubiquitin. Ubiquitin is a chemical tag, it's a molecule, and ubiquitin is recognized by the proteasome. And so anything that has a ubiquitin tag on it can bind the proteasome and then is shoved through this grinder where it gets totally destroyed. So, I like to think of it as like that meme, like omae mo shindeiru, like once you've been tagged, you're already dead. And so this ubiquination of these paternal mitochondria, they just get like Thanos snapped out of existence by the egg, which makes the egg even more badass than it already is. I guess it increases the surface area for oxygen transport. I mean, is that the nucleus, or is that for sure like ejecting mitochondria as well? I didn't know the immune system could function inside of cells instead of just between them. I'm referring to them shuttling the foreign proteins outside of the cell. So if you know, there's a possibility that paternal mitochondrial proteins get shoved out into the surface of the egg, which maybe will be recognized by the immune system somehow, but again, not confident in that. Phi is also a weeb, mad respect. I mean, I'm a VTuber, would you expect any less, right? Dima, can viruses target mitochondria? Absolutely. So here's a sneak peek behind. So I'm doing the gonorrhea video, right? But I originally wanted to do HCMV, cytomegalovirus, because some viruses definitely target the mitochondria and use it for their own nefarious purposes. And I'm not prepared to talk about that today, but it's really cool. And when you see some of these pictures, like, I feel like when you learn biology in high school, you really don't get a lot, or at least me, I'm talking personally, like maybe you had an awesome biology teacher, and I respected my biology teachers, but I think they missed opportunities to show some really, really cool stuff. Like, we know from our biology education vaguely how viruses work, right? They infect a cell, they replicate in that cell, and then they leave the cell. But getting to know how and seeing how that happens, like, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture, a photograph of a cell being infected by a virus, but it's gnarly. We have this pretty picture of cells with organelles as they should be, and when viruses get in that like space, they're capable of rearranging the cells in horrible ways. They look absolutely terrible, and you can't help but feel bad for them. It's almost sickening. So if protein gets tagged, so if they get tagged by protein, there's a situation where a cell could mutate and have a surface where it couldn't be tagged. Mutate to have a surface where it couldn't be tagged. So I'm not entirely sure how to take that question, risky risk, but basically if we're talking about the context of displaying of antigens, then yes. There are a lot of pathogens that infect cells that can change those cells' surface proteins to better hide from the immune system. And please watch this gonorrhea video that I'm about to release, because gonorrhea is so good at hiding from the immune system with those exact techniques. High schools be like, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I mean, if there's one thing that you remember from biology class, it should be that. I'm happy that that exists, but getting to know the deep story of like how that happens is like, you know, to me it's a missed opportunity. Okay, so that's like it for me in terms of the presentation. I hope that like you all enjoyed hearing me rant and rave about the mitochondria. I'm sorry that I couldn't teach you anything new, you know, because you can get all this stuff in your textbook, right? But I hope that I've been able to put a fun little spin on what you've been learning, and now, you know, I'm vibing, I'm having a good time. I don't quite have to go just yet. Let's just turn this into a just chatting stream. Why not? Chatting about biology, if you all care to hang out with me a little longer. My cat is going crazy, by the way. She is absolutely going bonkers. Where do the mitochondria come from? Do they divide in the parent cell via mitosis? So mitochondria go through a process called binary fission. So they have their own set of proteins that they use to split into. That's a good question. Hope you blow up. Love these vids. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. So, I mean, I don't really have topics prepared beyond like stuff that's been on my mind recently. So, you know, if y'all have anything that you want to ask, if not, then I'm just going to start ranting about some stuff and then we'll close out the stream. I'm so happy to have gotten a super chat. That I really wasn't expecting any of that to happen until like I formally talked about memberships. Actually, that's a really good idea to talk about. Like, I have my idea of what I want to do with membership. Like, obviously emotes, right? That's obvious. But I'm wondering if, you know, any of you watching have ideas that I could implement for membership tier rewards. Now, given I'm probably not going to get to a lot of them because like this is my full-time, this is not my full-time job. I have a full-time job, right? I have a full-time job, which makes actually doing membership rewards like pretty hard. But I think I have a way to make it so that I don't drive myself crazy with doing membership incentives. Could you do something on autoimmunity or pathogenic resistance? That's fun. So my next video is gonorrhea, and we'll hear about how gonorrhea evades the immune system. In terms of resistance, there's going to be a lot in that story. I have a bit of that video that talks about how gonorrhea deals with drugs, which is super interesting, I think. In terms of autoimmunity, to me, that's a bit of a tougher line because, like with pathogens, I can kind of make it cute and cuddly, you know, I can get Toxo to draw me some fun little germs. But autoimmunity, to me, there's a delicate balance, right? Because I talk about disease and I talk about health, and I want to do it in a way that toes the line between, you know, making it cute and cuddly and fun to learn, but not to make light of this situation, right? I don't want to ever make it feel like I'm making fun of having an autoimmune, you know what I mean? Whereas like a disease, like a pathogen, I can dunk on a pathogen, right? But with the autoimmunity, it's a little tougher. So I'm gonna need more time to like write in a way where that kind of stuff is more sensitive. Maybe some games with members. Many streamers do it. I think one day that'll be a possibility, but right now I have a potato laptop that I stream from. Once I get a more powerful machine, I think that'll be fun. Unfortunately, there's not like Spore that's multiplayer, at least not that I'm aware. Well, does Spore have multiplayer? Or is it like defunct now? Might be defunct now. A bit like Kierkegaard? Yeah. The fun story about Kierkegaard is that before I started this YouTube channel, like one of the things that I would have wanted to do with my career is to work for them, but unfortunately they only take people who can communicate in German. Right? Yeah. I do think their videos are very good, but and like another fun thing, I actually had an entirely different rabies video made. This is actually my third video that I've made about rabies. I junked the first one because I didn't like it, and then I made a second rabies video and I never published it because Kierkegaard that same week dropped their rabies video, and so that really took the wind out of my sail because, you know, I didn't want to be accused of like ripping them off, and you know, lo and behold, I know it's like getting one guide, but I did get a comment that accused me of ripping off Kierkegaard. I'm like, I didn't though. Like, you can't You can't. You can cover the same thing, but in radically different ways. I'm not upset about it anymore. But when I read that comment, I was like, do you not get the fact that like biology is like real? Biology is real, so we're gonna say the same things because we're taking from biology, and biology says the same thing. Kyrgyzstan are very, very nuclear war nowadays. That's true. I haven't watched a Kyrgyzstan video in a while, but I did see more and more of those apocalyptic thumbnails come out, and I think that like, I don't know. I don't want to do that with my channel. I don't. Again, with a whole like, I don't want to scare people, right? Those surprise pants that feel when biology is real. True. Very true. Yeah. Do you have a list of things that you want to cover, or do you just write it as it comes? So I have a long list, and it's been shuffled constantly in terms of like, I want to honor what people want to hear about, but I also want to intersperse it with stuff that I want to talk about. And the reason why is that my overall like YouTube strategy is that I do a video for the algorithm. So that was my rabies video. And then right after, I do a video for me. That was my bacteria addiction video. Because I want people to stay for me. I don't want people to stay because I cover the topical things that they want to hear about. Because, again, I knew that the rabies video had potential to get big because people want to hear about rabies. But I want people to hear about all of biology. So the priority list is constantly shifting between things that I think people want to see and the things that I personally think are interesting, and I'm hoping to pill all of you into agreeing with me. Like, I want you to stay on board because I want to convince you that I have good taste in biology. Why neutrophil and not macrophage, by the way? I think neutrophils are cuter, you know, smaller, fluffier. Macrophage is also so I've said this before, but in terms of the deep lore of my channel, or me and Toxo's channel, because this is in collaboration with Toxo, who does all of the art, by the way. I don't know how to draw. Is that way back when, right before Cells at Work released, we had an idea to do a YouTube channel where we would do something like this channel, where we would make animated videos about biology. But at the time, when I was in grad school, that was really hard to do. Animation is a lot more intensive, and I found it very difficult to juggle animation with my coursework, right, and my research. And then when Cells at Work dropped, it was like way better than anything that we could have done. So again, it's like I'm constantly getting scooped. Constantly getting scooped by people with more resources than me, which, you know, that's just reality, right? So we ended up never finishing that project, and that was supposed to be a lot more like Kyrgyzstan. And then, you know, many years later, you know, I'm thinking like, oh, I have the time to do a creative project now because I have a full-time job and I can pay bills and I don't have to have an existential crisis over how am I going to get paid. Which, by the way, like when I open membership, you know, I don't need your money. I have a full-time job. I live very comfortably on that money. But if you want to help produce my content and maybe help me pay for artists, like that would be pretty chill. Because that money would just go right back into the content of the channel as well. So I was going to reveal this later, but the money that I get from this channel, the first thing that I'm doing with that money is treating Toxo to omakase sushi, because for those of you who don't know, Toxo is my partner, and I asked her to do all of these illustrations for me, including the background and the logo art, and, you know, this live 2D. She learned how to live 2D. Like, she's done an incredible amount of work for the channel, and she's refused any kind of compensation. And so I finally got her to agree. I was like, if I make money on YouTube, will you let me treat you to omakase? And she did agree to that. So, but yeah, to get back to the story, we had these assets lying around, all these different images, and there's a macrophage design, because back then my first video was going to be about tuberculosis, and comparing the neutrophil design, which is this design, and the macrophage, this one's just cuter. So that's just how we came to that decision. Yeah, shallow topical biology videos are quite the problem on YouTube nowadays. I benefit from the fact that I don't have to live on YouTube. Like my primary income is not on YouTube, so I don't begrudge people who do, you know, who want to do that topical stuff to hit the algorithm just right. Because if you make money, if your paycheck depends on that kind of stuff, then I just think, you know, that's not their fault, that's the algorithm, right? So my goal is that, you know, that people stay for my taste in biology rather than pushing buttons that trigger neurons, right? So there are a lot of people asking me to do prions, which I'm definitely going to do, but I'm going to do it my way and not in a way that will make you fear for the apocalypse. She can't resist food bribes, exactly. Especially not food bribes that are coming out of a return on investment like this YouTube channel. Yeah, she really deserves, I think. And you know, you could say like, why don't you just treat her to omakase? Well, I do. Like my current form of recomp is that like, thank you for drawing everything for me. I thank her all the time. I'm like, anytime you want to go eat sushi, I will treat you to sushi. I'm very grateful, very thankful for all of the art. But I want to do something big for her because like this channel like wouldn't exist without her. I actually, in a previous iteration, one of the failed launches of this idea, I actually was gonna be like a face cam YouTuber. Like I rented a studio and recorded myself with my face on it, and I had like a lab coat and I was reading like a slide, and it was very like SciShow-esque, but without the budget or the skills. And it's really through Toxo's hard work that we got such, in my opinion, a unique, I hate to say the word, but brand, you know? Name one other cell-based VTuber out there. You can't. Or maybe you can. I just don't know them then, you know. But yeah, I think that maybe one day it would be fun to publish some of the stuff that I had. Engine Crafter, thank you for the super chat. Toxo Coffee Fund, thank you so much. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. That will go towards the lofty goal of bringing her to an omakase place one day. That'd be very, very hype. But I think maybe like for members one day, because I'm not comfortable, because I don't want to like put the failed quote unquote failed, like the stuff that I don't quite believe in as much publicly on YouTube, because then you put a kind of crummy video and then the algorithm, like it sucks on the algorithm. And I don't want that. So maybe a membership incentive could be that I kind of publish some of my non-doxable failed projects. Because I think because of the algorithm, you don't often get to see like the stuff that people do that they don't like. And I think that's informative because, you know, I'm not afraid to say that I'm quite happy with my content. That everything that I put out, I feel like the quality matches the amount of effort and skill that I had. So it's not that like I love every video that I make, right? Like the tuberculosis video, like the very first video on this channel, is pretty much a blatant ripoff of Tierzu, which is a great YouTube channel, by the way. Thank you, More Juice, a contribution to the cause for caffeination. Thank you so much. Thank you. Toxo is actually working quite long today, so she won't actually be able to see these super chats, but I'll message her now, and so that you can get a reaction. Again, just totally unexpected when I hadn't even talked about membership. I'm sure that'll bring her a smile to her face because she works on weekends. She has time and effort to do all of the art for all of my channel that I don't get from like Creative Commons licensed or free use stuff. And she sometimes works long hours on weekends. Like, it really means a lot that you are helping me to show my appreciation. A favorite movie or show? So right now, I am mostly making content, so I don't have time to consume. But the thing that has occupied the most mental space for me has been an anime called Blue Period. Blue Period referring to, Akasso's Blue Period, and it's an anime that is about a high school student coming to realize that they're actually very passionate about art. And so the reason why this resonates with me so much is because when I gave up medicine as a goal, thank you, Surprise Pants. Imagine working on weekends. I know, it's crazy. Like, after I finished grad school, I swore that I would never work weekends, but even I have to work weekends occasionally. Yeah, so Blue Period's an awesome show about coming to realize what your true passion in life is. And the way that Blue Period does it is so beautiful, and I've cried multiple times during that anime because my entire life I had wanted to become a medical doctor because I loved biology and I liked helping people. But I actually realized that what I love about biology isn't that I get to use it for medicine, because I would make a terrible doctor, but it was because I enjoyed the stories so much and I enjoyed sharing stories. I like storytelling. I'm a dungeon master because I like storytelling. I'm a teacher because I like storytelling. I do VTubing on YouTube because I like storytelling, right? And so there was a moment I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. There was a moment in undergrad where the pre-health advisor, and I'll never forget his contribution to my life, my pre-health advisor talked me out of being a doctor, which I know it sounds so messed up, right? My pre-health advisor had a meeting with everybody who said that they wanted to be a doctor and basically attempted to talk them all out of it. And the people that didn't get talked out of it then went on to become doctors, which is great. But my pre-health advisor sat me down and asked me, like, why do you want to be a doctor? And I was like, I like biology and I like helping people. And then he said, why don't you go to grad school? And I could not give him a good answer. And it's so silly because I had spent the majority of my life like building this idea up that I would one day be a medical doctor. And in that like one question, it totally shattered my conception of self, and having to reform my identity and my career goals as something else was terrible. And like I had to like come out to my parents, like that's in all the stories of people giving up being doctors. I find that that's the one that resonates most with me, that I had to have a conversation with my parents who had been so proud of me up until then. They would brag like, oh, my son is going to become a doctor, he's doing so well in school. And I had to like tell them one day that like, I don't think that I want to do medicine. I think I want to study. And they were like, what do you mean? And so I said, I want to go to grad school. And like, my parents, like, this was understandably kind of devastating for them, because if you're a medical doctor, then your future is secured, right? You're going to be making money, you're going to live a comfortable life, and it's the goal for all parents for their children to live a comfortable life. And that sense of security was pulled out from all of us. And they asked me, so like, do you want to become a professor? Because if I became a professor, that's not a bad living either. But I didn't have a good answer to that, because being a professor, getting to that stage is extremely difficult, right? You are the top. Hey, look who decided to show up. Look who decided to show up. Hello, Toxo. I hope your day at work isn't too bad. I hope the super chats, I hope they put a smile on your face as much as they did mine. I explained to chat that like you are both my VTubing mama and papa. Not only did you do all the art, but you also rigged everything. And I did tell them about our omakase goal, which is crazy. Thank you, thank you. Yes, let's all celebrate Toxo. Let's go. Taking time off of her very, very busy weekend to say hello to the cellmates. Yeah, I hope things are going well. No, I'm not talking shit. No, surprise pants. No. I've given Toxo too much power. I've given her too much power. No, I don't smell. I don't smell. No, don't believe the propaganda. What the hell was I talking about? Yeah, so I had to come out to my parents and be like, I might not have a secure financial future because I want to go. His nucleus is not multi-lobulated. Don't let him lie to you. No, my secret fake neutrophil. No, stop. My cred. My cred. My credibility. No, the multi-lobs are just in the z-axis. It's just in the screen. You just can't see it. But yeah, having it coming out with my parents. I don't know what I want to do. I do want to go to grad school. I want to study more. I want to learn biology. I have no idea what that means. I don't have the confidence that I will reach the level of professor because professors are goated. They are so smart and so passionate and so skilled. Bye, Toxo. Stay safe. Don't let the microbe bite. True. No, I'm not a macrophage. And so the way that I describe the feeling of like giving up on med school and being pulled towards what I was actually passionate about is like similar to what the main character in Blue Period felt. It almost felt like I didn't have a choice and that my passion would not allow me to do anything else. And to be feeling like you have no agency in your future, like if I could choose, I would choose to do something that afforded me a lifestyle where I could live comfortably. That just makes sense from like a mathematical life happiness point of view. And despite that, despite knowing that, you know, money in biology is not great, despite that, I felt like awakened by my pre-health advisor. Like having to reform my own identity and goals allowed me the space to be moved. And what I felt moved by was my interest in biology. I felt like I could not choose anything else. Much in the way where, like, you know, in pre-health, they say that if you think you could do anything else, then do it. If you can live a happy life doing anything else but medicine, then do it. The only people left in medicine should be people who have no other choice. And I've never felt that way about anything besides that I wanted to study biology. Thank you, More Juice. You are my lab fees, Professor Fi. No! Thank you, thank you. I'm not a professor, though. I do teach, but I'm not a professor. But thank you, thank you. So, that's why I love Blue Period, because it mirrored the feeling that I had where I was like, there's something in my life that I want to do more than anything else, and I can't imagine a happy life doing anything else, even if that means my financial future is insecure. And I think that was a very powerful moment, because for the first time I put myself over money, and that's not easy to do. I don't begrudge anybody for doing it. And I'm still in STEM. Like, I don't even have it the worst, right? People who go into the humanities and people who go into art, they have it way worse because their financial prospects are even worse. And if they love what they do, they have no other choice. And you have to give that to them, which is why I will not tolerate anybody, you know, shit talking the humanities or art. You know, you don't, not in my chat, right? Infinite respect for following what you want to do despite the financial turmoil that might put you through. Not a professor yet. I'm actually totally out of the running for being a professor. I haven't done bench work in quite some time. But I would, because the thing is, professors have a lot more obligations than full-time instructors do. I love teaching. It's what I want to do forever. Thank you, Dan Doodle. Gotta go now. Keep these vids up. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to the stream. I've heard great things about Blue Period. Thank you for the super chat too, by the way. I've heard great things about Blue Period, but I feel like I'm not in the right mind space to watch it yet. It will, it'll wreck you. If you are in the right mindset. Like, you know, I don't often push things, you know, watch it when you're ready. When you're ready for something that will make you feel, if you're in the mood for something that is sincere and like raw, then I would go for Blue Period, because the stakes are not that high. It's not like dramatic and or like edgy. It's just very much like, damn, don't you love it when the anime boy does something with all his heart? And I think there's something about that in like Japanese culture where there's this expectation to pursue things to your utmost, right? And I don't know if there's an equivalent in the US or in Western culture, because like in the 90s, as a millennial, there's this plague of, what do I want to call it? Apathy? Like, it wasn't cool to try for a good period of time growing up. But in Japan, like, from what I understand, like, there's that culture of pursuing things to your utmost. And, you know, you see that all the time in sports anime. Just a couple of anime characters giving it their all and sometimes failing, sometimes winning, and to me that's like my favorite genre of stuff. Yeah, I think to me, like, how I know that, so there are two things that make me cry. The first thing is people trying their hardest, period. Just when people give it their all, no matter in what context, that always like strikes a nerve with me. And then the other is like, so like corny to say, but like when like dads say that they're proud of their children, like, or where parents in general say that they're proud of their children, that really gets to me too. Not that my dad does it, right? Like, I think being in the US, my parents have softened up and are a lot more Americanized than some of my colleagues, where like my parents tell me that they love me more than I tell them that I love them, which sucks for me as a child. I should probably tell them that I love them more. But there is a notion of like being proud of someone and getting that recognition is meaningful. It's tough. You just want to root for the little guys that were right there. Yes, exactly. Exactly. You've made $20 this stream. You'll be richer than Bill Gates by the next stream for sure. Surely I will. Rich in social capital at the very least. I don't know that Bill Gates would do well as a VTuber. Thank you very much. The other thing that Toxo does like is boba, so if it doesn't go into an omakase fund, that $20 will definitely go into boba at the very least. But yeah, I don't know enough about myself to analyze myself further than the fact that I like these two things, but I realized that stuff impacts me to a point where I've caught myself telling my students that I'm proud of them, which is like weird, and I don't think I'll do that anymore because it's something that I think you say to someone who's younger, because I teach at a university level. So I think I said it once and it immediately felt wrong. I don't know, if your professor told you that they were proud of you, in undergrad by the way, how would that make you feel? I don't know. It felt weird to say it. And I'm also like not a professor, so like if your university teacher told you that they were proud of you, would that like creep you out? I'm never gonna do it again nonetheless, because I think it's a little weird. I do know that if I imagine my mentor telling me, like my undergrad mentor telling me that they were proud of me, that would definitely be kind of weird. And you know that boba has sugar, which is involved in the mitochondrial synthesis of ATP. Exactly. Exactly. It's a life-giving. Surely. Surely. Boba has become really big, which is not a surprise to anybody, I'm sure. But the thing about boba is that it has become such a cultural icon that in lecture, think a couple years ago, I noticed that someone who is not Asian came in wearing boba earrings. And in that moment, I was like, dang. Yo, fam, we made it. Depends on how close I am to my instructors. That's fair, sigh. Definitely depends on how close you are. When my PhD advisor told me that she was proud of me, I almost cried because it made me so happy. Ah, that makes me feel good. Yeah. The thing about people who are very sincere in their pursuit of passion is that I think that living a life of sincerity opens you up to a lot more emotional vulnerability than you might be ready for. So I think if my advisor told me that she was proud of me, I would probably break down too, because I worked damn hard in grad school. But unfortunately, and here's the secret that I haven't admitted yet, but I didn't finish. Maybe I admitted it on a different stream, but I didn't finish grad school, so I don't think I'll ever get to hear that my advisor is proud of me because I quit, didn't want to do research anymore, just wanted to teach. But, you know, along those lines, you know, my advisor had this like deep story about how, like, this is a professor teaching and doing research at like a top 10 university in the US, and she was telling me this story about how when she was defending her thesis at a top 3 American university, I'm not going to say which one, but it's one of those, the ones that your parents want you to go to. When she was defending her thesis, she was at the top of this like spiral staircase, and she was overhearing the reception to her thesis. Again, incredibly brilliant person. She was hearing that, you know, the people reacting to her thesis defense were talking about how good it was, and she wasn't around. So this wasn't like sucking up to her in any kind of way. This was just like shooting the shit, being like, damn, that was like a really good presentation. And she was at the top of the spiral staircase alone, and she said that she started crying. And why is that? Was it because that she had finally felt recognition that her work was good and that she is a capable scientist? No. She was crying because she didn't believe them. Because her level of imposter syndrome ran so deep that, like, her inside I mean, Sai, if you're still around. So Cyderay is a psychologist who streams on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cyderay. If you're around, we can chat about imposter syndrome. But her imposter syndrome was so deep that her brain was fracturing at the notion that she was getting recognition because she had such crippling self-doubt. And, you know, you only get that like messed up, I think, by trying your hardest and like living a life of sincerity. And that makes me very sad for her. And I, to this day, don't know how she feels about her imposter syndrome. Me, on the other hand, I don't have imposter syndrome. I think I'm great. I think I'm awesome. I wish I had a relatable story about imposter syndrome, and I do, about medicine, right? I had imposter syndrome the entire time I was a pre-med student. But after I switched off of pre-med, I was like, I'm pretty good at like learning and teaching biology. I'm pretty good. But when I was, oh, dude, this reminds me of a story. When I was in pre-med in high school, my friends used to like tell me I couldn't do it. How messed up is that, right? Those were my friends. They were telling me that I would never make it as a doctor. That was messed up, but they were right, which was kind of interesting. I need to try boba. I hear about it all the time, but I've never set aside the time for it to go out of my way to get it. I would set my expectations appropriately that boba, you should try. I would always give everything 3 tries. Like the only food that I don't like, and I love food, the only food that I've tried that I don't like are olives, and I always try an olive. I've blown past 3 tries for olives. But sometimes you just have to acquire a taste for things. That is one of the regrets I have from my time in university. I should have formed more friendships with my professors. Some of them were badass. Yeah, professors, by the time you're in grad school, you get to call professors by their first name. Because you're like at their level. As an undergrad, it's a little like, you know, not as much like that, but it shows you that you are approaching competency, which I think is important. Yeah. Take advantage of their open office hours. Don't be afraid to ask them the questions after lecture. Yeah, your professors are academics that are at the top of the world. Like, if you ever want to feel how small the top of the world is, go and chat with a professor, and you'll see what it takes to summit academia, and it's not trivial. Engine Crafter, I will be graduating next year, and there's still about 600 people in our generation. You definitely still have time to talk to your professors. Sai, imposter syndrome is wild because it's so ubiquitous, but there's really not that much research about it. Is that true? That's awesome. Imposter syndrome collab stream? I mean, you've got my number. Wait, who? High schoolers, SMH. Yeah, you know, maybe I'll let you know later. I don't know if I would be the best for an imposter syndrome collab because, well, yeah, I mean, I guess I just said I did experience it as a pre-med, but I did end up being an imposter. I was never suited for the job of medicine because I think what separates me from, or if I had to really introspect as to why I think that I would have done poorly as a doctor, it's because I don't love that work. And like, that sounds like such an obvious answer, right? But the people that I see that are doctors, it's not that they love being doctors, is that they very much tolerate the work better than I do. And I'm a baby. If you like watch my passion stream, my passion rating is like a 9 out of 10. Like, I'm highly motivated by doing what I want to do. And if you make me do what I don't want to do, I'm going to be bad at it. And so the idea of seeing patients, doing blood draws, talking to patients who are unscrupulous, dealing with insurance companies, taking the blame for how bad the American healthcare system is, when in reality it's the insurance companies that are bad, dealing with hospital administration, dealing with the influence of capitalism in healthcare, like, I don't think I could tolerate that kind of work. I think I would have enjoyed medical school. I don't think I could have made it as a doctor. Imposter syndrome collab with separate channels for inner monologue. Is that an Among Us reference? But part of like what makes Blue Period so special is that the main character goes from this like apathetic 90s kid who's too cool to try to like sincerely following his passion after he realizes that he himself was an imposter, living a duplicitous life devoid of passion. And like, you don't have to like find passion in your work, and I really made that apparent in the medicine stream, but not the medicine stream, the passion stream. Like, not everybody has to live like I do. In fact, there are a lot of downsides to being motivated by passion so deeply, and that is, if I'm ever in a job that isn't teaching, I'm going to find it very difficult. Risky Risk, is it on Netflix? I believe it is. Yeah, my sister was on the track to becoming an eye doctor, and she hated dealing with patients, so she quit and went to private sector research instead. Yeah, like, the issue is that you don't always get the chance to try being a doctor before you're already saddled in $1 million worth of debt in America for medical school, right? Like, how do you know if you're going to enjoy something if you don't get to try it? And you can say, well, you can get an internship, you can do volunteer work in a hospital, and I did, right? I got volunteer work at a hospital, but they don't actually have you do anything. In fact, I was doing Mandarin translations, which I shouldn't have done because I'm not qualified to translate Mandarin, for some of the ER staff, which was a big no-no because they were just so short-staffed, and I was like, this sucks. And like, I would like shuffle paperwork from one bin to another. Like, I would occasionally help roll a patient from one room to another. Like, it was just like nothing. And so you could say, oh, well, you should have applied for internships. I did, and I got rejected from all of them. So this is an interesting topic to talk about one day more fully. It's just like the depth of rejection in my career is so deep. Like, the amount of failure that has to happen before something works is like staggering, right? And so I got rejected from all but one grad school. I got rejected from every medical internship I had ever applied to. I got rejected from all but one grant application that I applied for, and I applied for, over the course of my grad school career, I think between undergrad and grad school, I think I applied for, well, that's not true. I got a couple of small undergraduate grants when I was in undergrad, but if I had to assign a score, I think I was 50-50 on getting approval for money. And so I would have loved a hospital internship where I could follow and shadow a doctor, but I just didn't. So how was I supposed to know that I would have hated medicine? Instead of staking. And so like, that's the trap that a lot of pre-med people face, is that if you don't get a chance to see whether or not you could tolerate that life, you're gonna be stuck in $1 million worth of debt and 4 years of your youth wasted. And that's no good, which is why, like, this decision to go into medicine is non-trivial for a lot of people, right? Damn, man, I assume that's in response to the depth of rejection. Yeah, I mean, it sucks, but like, you only need to succeed one time, which has been really, really, I think, how my life has gone, because I got into like an awesome grad school. Like, again, I'm very open to bragging about my successes. Not only did I get into a great grad school, I also have a job at one of the best universities in America, and I got rejected from every other job application. So like, you only need to succeed one time for your life to go well. And I don't know if that like is inspiring. I try not to do like life advice on my channel, but it's just, I'm just reporting my lived life, that I have applied for way more things than I have succeeded in getting. I mean, at some point it kind of felt like the universe did not want me to become a doctor because I had been rejected from all of these hospital internships. That, like, you know, it wasn't trivial to do those. I had to apply. I had to tell them that my GPA was good enough, and my GPA, I worked hard enough for that GPA to be pretty good. But they didn't want me, man. I don't know what to say, right? But I'm kind of glad that they didn't take me, because it would have been a waste of time. Because I get to do this as a hobby, right? Like, if I were a medical doctor, I don't think that I would have the time or energy to do this on the side, because it takes time to prepare for these biology streams. Even just talking about the mitochondria, which I know, like, from my years of training, like, decently well enough to, like, just give myself a refresher and then talk about it, it still takes time. And, like, you know, if I were recovering from an overnight shift, would I really have the energy to stream later that day? Probably not. But now I just get to chill and talk about biology that I like. And that's dope. That's my actual brag for the stream. It's chill. But life as a pre-med was freaking miserable. I had professors who would start off their inspiring quote-unquote lectures with, oh, you know, I was pre-med and then I dropped it to study computer science and now I'm a professor at blah 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 university. Like, professors undersell how big of a deal that is because professors are just built different, and I find that makes them unrelatable in a way that I hope that I'm not. Because imagine like pushing yourself to get all the good grades in pre-med and then in your senior year just making the decision to switch to computer science like it's nothing. That always infuriated me on these like, oh, I quit pre-med stories. They make it seem like it was no big deal. But it's not. It's a big deal, right? You just spent a lot of your training in a field that doesn't influence what you'll do later in your life, and then in that short time period you're going to have to pick up another field. And so like some of these goated professors who are like at the top of the world, yeah, cram all of the computer science in a degree in 1 year, sure, like you can do that, and they just say it like it's no big deal, when in reality that's just, it's not human. Yeah, that's always made me mad about when people drop the whole like, oh, if I upended my entire educational career for a different educational path, so can you. And like, technically that answer is yes, because it's never too late to switch. That doesn't make it easy, right? It's not that straightforward. As a comp sci student, I feel you. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you were in the stream, but like I quit computational biology when I had to write software that would align genomes, and I could not for the life of me get it to work. It was so immediately frustrating that I was just like, you know, the money is good, but I value my free time and sanity too much to sit through troubleshooting. Hello, nothing. Greetings after a lot of time. I finally came to your stream. Good to have you. We're just chatting now, though. Yeah. The first half of the stream was, you know, mitochondria and how mitochondria are cool. And if you thought that respiration was boring, you should definitely check it out, because I try to reframe respiration as something that you would actually care about. Yeah. Comp sci hasn't been entirely useless for me though, because in grad school we had to relearn it. I actually did use it a couple of times in grad school, as well as some of my own independent projects, which will never see the light of day. I made a this is incredibly revealing, but I made a waifu taste revealer? I don't know if that's the right term. But it was a program that had you rate like 500 different anime characters, anime waifus, based on their appearance. And then at the end of that rating, you didn't have to rate all 500. You can choose how many waifus you rated. But basically, at the end of rating X number of waifus, you would get a report that tells you what your taste is. So, like, you would just go and you would, you know, rate them from 1 to 5. And like after a certain amount of data was collected, the program would tell you, oh, you're into like idols, or you're into blue hair, something like that, right? Because the thing about knowing oneself is that you only think you know yourself to a certain degree. Like you have a finite amount of self-awareness. And until you treat yourself like a study subject, you might not be able to fully appreciate what your real inner monologue is like, right? I'm not going to put this program out anywhere. I haven't published it because it's deeply, deeply embarrassing and probably reveals way too much about how deep I am into weeb stuff. That program will never see the light of day. Nothing. Can I suggest something for your videos? I really like the short videos about biology and fictional stuff like Pokemon. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the membership perks that I think I will unveil later is helping me decide what to cover. I'm very obstinate as to what I cover because, again, I'm very passion driven, so I'll typically only make a video on something that I actually really am passionate about making. But membership is a good way to help me get out of my comfort zone. So yeah, I'll take a suggestion now. You don't have to be a member. I can't promise that I'll do it because I'm teaching now, so I'm quite busy. Don't lie, at the end of it, it was just a print statement that just outputs your waifu is trash, wasn't it? Oh, I wish I'd thought of that. You know, I was actually really close to publishing that program for the fan base that I was a part of. I'm really happy that I didn't, though, because it was really bad. First of all, it was not that it was buggy, but it was very poorly optimized and it looked like crap. I wish that I had someone rate all 500 and then come to a print statement that just says your waifu is trash, though. That would be incredible. Fi, don't fear your inner weeb, embrace the cringe. The thing is that there is a non-zero chance that I have a student that finds me one day. And that is terrifying. That the prospect of being discovered by a student is my worst nightmare, honestly. And yeah. But yeah, I think, like, for you computer scientists in the chat, if you want to take that idea and just do it, feel free to. You don't have to credit me at all. I would love to, like, have that be done. I would just love that to be out there one day. Yeah. Yes, I'm a big fan of fictional stuff. It's called the SCP Foundation. I really think you could find interesting sicknesses and maybe you could rate them. Yeah, so SCP is on the list of shorts, believe it or not. So that's already in the pipeline of stuff that I am interested in making videos about. That would be interesting. And there are a couple of candidates that I've seen in the SCPs that would make for good short videos. I might have to wait until the summer to do them, though, because, right, you know, the school semester for us lasts until the summer. But come summertime, there might be some SCP-related content coming out. I know that's a long time to wait, though. Oh yeah, if your student found out about you, they might become obsessed with you or something. Just shake my head. I don't need that kind of attention. I try to maintain a very professional boundary with my students because I don't need them to give my life more trouble than it already is. SCP Pog, true. Man, I have cringe comments that I left under online manga that I still get notifications about to this day. I might spontaneously cringe to death anytime I see those notifications. I did write fanfiction when I was a wee little stem cell, when I was maybe like 10. And yeah, every time I remember that cringe, it sends me into oblivion. I apoptose every time I think about that. Oh no, math, my kryptonite. Yeah. I am now imagining you imported NumPy and SciPy and all of its sophisticated numerical analysis tools just to calculate the waifu compatibility matrix. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I did use matrices. I used the dictionaries. I'm just vaguely remembering some of the program. Yeah, I think I used like a big ass dictionary of all the anime waifus, and then like every time you loaded the program, it would show them to you in a different order so that you can randomize for order, and then you would rate them. And then the program would store that rating. Each waifu had like a matrix of values, you know, hair color, appearance, fashion, hair length. You know, I had all these attributes, and then, you know, when you would rate them, those attributes would get that kind of number, and so you would get the total amount of attributes. So like your long hair score is X, your blue hair score is Y, your yandere personality preference is Z. And so the program would report to you the 3 attributes that you ranked the highest over all the waifus that you rated. Hi, the dyslexic demon. That's kind of beautiful, TBH. I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to, the fan fiction or my waifu raider. Dude, making a freaking AI to rate your waifu tastes. I'm not that big brained, but if somebody wants to do that one day, that would be really awesome. Man, computer science scares me a tad bit more than cellular biology. It really clicks for some people, and it can be quite difficult for others. I would just say just give it a shot. There are tons of free Python programs online that you can just dip your toes into, and those are either going to capture your imagination or bore you to death. I don't know. You know, it's really weird that I joined like a few minutes ago and you guys are talking about waifus. Listen, I'm a VTuber. You should know that there's like a 20% chance that any kind of conversation that you pop into is going to be about waifus. I wrote that program, the waifu program, the waifu analyzer, over COVID because I was so brain dead that entire time. I was like, well, I can't go into the lab to do research because we're all in quarantine, and I suck at League of Legends, so I might as well practice Python. What's a Python project that I would love to try? Waifus. I am motivated by my passion. Even if that means having to learn Python again. If I want something to be made, I'm just gonna hecking make it myself. Yeah, those are some nostalgic times. Terrifying times, COVID, right? But that was the time that I was working on this channel, like the 1.0 pre-VTuber version of this channel too. But because of like COVID inertia, I guess you could call it, like I said that I would work on a YouTube channel during all of COVID, but just the suckiness of COVID made it very hard to do anything more than program a waifu simulator and be bad at League. Waifu cells, keep that in mind because that will be something in the future. I'm not going to say what, it's a surprise, but yeah, keep waifu cells in mind. I'm currently trying to crack the math supporting AI. Maybe I'm too bored. Yeah, I don't know. AI is just a blur to me. All right. I have a gonorrhea video to edit. Um, not using genetic modification for making waifus. That would not be none of that in my channel, please. But the idea of a cellular waifu, keep that in mind. I have a gonorrhea video to edit. I'm very, very passionate about this video. I think my editing skills have really improved from the rabies video. So when that gonorrhea video drops, I'll be sure to like blast you all with PR. Um, Even if gonorrhea doesn't seem like the most interesting microbe to you, it is. Trust me. It's got a personal connection to neutrophils. So as a neutrophil myself, I take it very personally that gonorrhea has evolved mechanisms to fight neutrophils in particular. So please look forward to that. And yeah, thank you all for coming to listen to me talk about mitochondria, you know, powerhouse of the cell and all that, but also thank you for all the super chats. Again, really wasn't expecting them. Uh, did put a large smile on my face, and thanks for hanging out to just chat with me afterwards. I hope you all have a great rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, y'all. Bye. Where's my mute?